Welcome back to another episode of Card Talk, a podcast where we spend just a little bit of time talking about cards from Lord of the Rings, the card game. I'm your host, Dave Walsh.
And I'm Ted Bannock, and I love talking about cards. And I'm super excited for today's episode because it's very wizardy.
Wizardy.
And it's gonna... It's gonna get you. It's gonna be a surprising one, and I'm excited for it.
Are you gonna be aghast?
I am gonna be. I think our listeners will be aghast, and I think they'll take us as very cunning hosts.
Probably.
I think that's what they'll commend us on. Like, wow, those guys are sharp and wise and cunning.
There's an uncle joke that's in there somewhere, but I'm gonna leave it be for the people who know about the uncle jokes. But before we get into the card, right, Ted, maybe we should talk to people a little bit about what we got going on here.
What's shaking? Is it bacon? It's not. It's cards.
No, it's cards.
It's card stuff.
It is. So just very quickly, as you are listening here, we do have a blog. Matt over at the blog keeps up with what we do here at the pod. So you can see the YouTube channel. You can go to the blog, Card Talk 2018 at cardtalk2018.com, and we can contact you over there. We also have the audio feed, and then Micah does Second Breakfast. He plays some stuff, and we have a new series at the blog, which is called A Beginner's Tale. A friend of mine, Chris Robold, is going at the game from a new point of view, and that's super interesting. And then lastly, we have a Patreon. If you want to support us and what we do here, patreon.com/cardtalk2018. And I'm kind of announcing here that we have swag getting ready for this year. So October release of the swag date. So officially, if you want to be ready for swag, you have to be a $5 or more a month patron of the show from April until October. It's going to release at the Con of the Rings. I know we've been a little lackadaisical on swag lately. Most people who we talk to were like, that's fine, we don't need swag, we just want to support what you do, which is always amazing, but we also want to make sure that we give back to the community that supports us. So you can be aghast at that.
Whoa. Yeah, it's cool. Sometimes we do stuff.
Yeah.
And that's fun.
Yeah, that's good. But enough about that. Ted, let us know. What is the card we are talking about today?
It's Radagast Cunning.
Oh my god, I didn't even know.
So this is a cool card, and I really like it. So let's talk about it. Okay. I'm going to read it. Do you mind if I read it, Dave?
Why don't you read it, Ted? Okay, so just so you know how we do things on the show, Ted, you read the card.
Cool.
Okay.
It's called Radagast.
And then we're going to talk about the card.
Oh!
Yeah. Yep.
Oh. If you say so.
Yeah.
Well, it's called Radagast.
And then we're going to rate the card.
Holy smokes.
I'm sorry. I'm being a jerk. No. Go ahead. I'm not going to interrupt you anymore.
Radagast Cunning, a one-cost lore event that reads Quest Action. Choose an enemy in the staging area until the end of the phase. That enemy does not contribute its threats. Boom.
This is just it's a enemy version of Secret Paths, which we just reviewed, right? So yes. The most recent card that we put out on the feed was Secret Paths, and this does the same thing except for enemies. So let me take this in a little bit different direction, because we just did release Secret Paths, and we get how this works, and there's targets for this, right? But I feel like there's there's not as many valuable targets for this card as there are when locations hit, because those locations can go get X cost locations, and I mean there are some X threat enemies and stuff.
Yes,
like the hunters from Mordor in the very first cycle, Hunt for Gollum and those things. Like they're not X threat, but their threat goes up.
Yes.
But the question that I want to ask,
okay,
is twofold. Number one, is this
Westfold.
card? it's Westfold, right? Number one, is this or part A is this card really that is it really that analogous to Secret Paths? And B, like what kind of decks does this card shine in? Like how are the players going to play this? What decks are they going to use to do this? So there's your lead in, Ted. Go ahead.
Okay. Thanks. Well, it's. I think you're kind of right where I'd say maybe not as strong as Secret Paths, because enemies. I'd say the average is probably 2 if you look at everything in the entire game, because there's a lot of 1. Maybe it's like 2.3 or 2.5 or something. If you take into effect everything. But there are a few really good targets, some that you mentioned, and one that specifically comes to mind, which is in the 2-player deluxe starter, and I think is also in the core set, is Goblin Town Scavengers.
It's not in the core set, but...
Okay. All right. So they're in the deluxe edition, and they have this...
No, it's not. Anyways. Now I gotta...
Okay, I thought it was in the core set.
I don't know. I'll look it up.
We're going to look it up. Anyway, they're for sure in the deluxe. I feel like they're out of the core set, though. But what they do, they have a 0 or 1 base threat cost, and they have a when revealed effect that each player has to discard the top card of your deck, and then their threat gets added to the cost. Like you add the cost of the flipped card to this goblin's threat. And so many times I've flipped over a Gandalf. Like they're 1 threat, and the other player goes and they're like 1. They flip over like a Secret Path, right? So it's 1 + 1, and then I'm like 5, like Gandalf, like +5. So now it's like a 7 threat card.
So not in the core set, but it is in the Dark of Mirkwood expansion, and it's in the Hunt for Gollum. So that's why you were probably equating it with the...
Okay.
Right. And they're all the same. Like, it's not renamed and different effect. It's all the same.
Okay.
They're all the same thing. So.
All right. So that's just one example, because that threat can climb high easily. You 2 people flip a 3 or 4 cost card. And then in multiplayer, if you're playing a 4-player, it goes up like each person flips a card. And even then, if each person flips a 2... it's +8 threat. It gets crazy. So there's a couple of targets that are really good, and so it can be scenario dependent. And I'd say it's not as... I'd say Secret Pass is probably more broadly useful.
Yeah, I always feel like that. There's always like one location that really just is trying to kill you. And locations can't kill you except by like 1 or 2 ways. It can have a ton of threat, it can have a ton of quest points, or it can have an effect on it, right? As opposed to, enemies that can, stay in the staging area or not stay in the staging area, then come down and kill you, or effect, or when reveal. Like there's just a million ways that they can come down.
Yeah. So, but it can still make the difference between questing successfully and not, right? Because for one resource, you cannot get a 3 willpower ally, right, on the table, or not usually. It depends on your deck, and maybe.
Like you could, right? All of a sudden you're playing, Elfstone, and that's one resource, and you shenanigans it into play or something.
Right. Right. But if you're in the quest phase and an enemy comes up that is 3 threat, and all of a sudden you are 2 willpower short of clearing the active location, which then prevents you from traveling to a new one. This card can be very beneficial because it can just kind of get you out of a jam, the same way Secret Pass can.
Right.
I do like to run both of these together, and I typically will run 2 of each.
Okay.
I just find that like 2 Secret Pass and 2 Radagast Cunning, having 4 copies of that type of effect tends to be the sweet spot, and they're very easy to play, and they get you out of a jam. And
it's almost like if you draw one and use, like, you can use them almost interchangeably. If the problem is there's too much threat in the staging area, and so then you need a tech to try to get rid of threat in the staging area or increase your willpower. And
right.
so, like, typically there'll be enemies and locations, and so having a couple of different ways to get lower that threat in the staging area is pretty good.
Yep.
So what kind of deck does this? Maybe it's better because this is a toolbox card for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe it's better to say, is there a kind of deck or a kind of archetype that this doesn't fit into? Or does, because you could say, well, it goes into a Lodol deck and a Hobbit deck and a Sylvan deck, but like, when aren't you playing? Does this go into, let's say, a location control deck? It's you got all your northern trackers out. Do you have to worry about this?
Yeah, good question. Honestly, because it's only 1 cost and it's flexible and it helps you in questing. And is there a game where you like don't quest?
Right.
Never. So, I say the effect is definitely stronger early game than late game, typically, right? Because the more time you have. So it's good to see this type of effect in your hand early when you're struggling to get willpower. Can help you with those early turns. But even if your deck is a little bit combat focused and you got 1 lore hero that is even meant to defend or do some fighting, it helps like contribute during the quest phase. Because if you find out that you're short on time or whatever, or short on willpower rather, even if you're sending 0, you're like, well, I can help by making this enemy be 0. Like it helps. Like it'll add up. But I would say there's no specific archetype. I honestly, anything that runs a single lore hero is fine. But I tend to put them where I have more lore resources, where I typically have 2 or a mono lore deck altogether.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and this is one of those things, like, I guess a rules question. A couple of things that, maybe not a rules question, but a rules clarification, is that just like every, modifier to threat and willpower, you can do this after staging. And so you can see what comes out. And, if you don't have anything right now, and then you stage, and then you have the, the big bad 5 threat thing, then... that's this is a great thing to do that with. It's pseudo questing after the fact,
which is strong.
Right.
And yeah, it's a good point. I can't remember if we mentioned that in the last episode or not. I'm sure we did, but when we talked about Secret Pass, you can play it after staging, what you just said, after, so you can pick the best target.
Mm-hmm.
You can play it before if you want to, I guess. If you're scared of, it's possible. Let's say you save a resource to play it. There are effects in the game that will steal your resources, right, and then you can't play it. So there's reasons to play it before
there's
that.
Also, a couple of cards, like real niche cases, that like reduce the amount of cards you flip over in staging by 1 to go find a location, right? And that's like, okay, do this, and then you have Secret Paths, you cancel it, or go find an enemy and do this. And what are those? There's the one in lore and the one in tactics. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah, like hidden paths and
hidden paths.
Wait no longer.
Yes. And so I mean, those are niche combo cases for each of these cards. Like where you do that. The second thing that I wanted to point out, and this is subtle, but can matter, is it doesn't reduce its threat to 0. It just doesn't contribute its threat. So targets like Spirit Mary, which will reduce your threat by reduce your threat by the threat of the thing that was just
The threat of the enemy.
Yeah, that was just revealed. Like it still triggers. It doesn't reduce it to 0, so you don't reduce your threat
That's
by you know, like
That's a good point. Yeah, it just doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't change the number if something references that number.
right.
Yeah.
So those are really the only specific things that I'm like. Not that I'm running this with my Spirit Mary deck all the time, but like, you know, hobbits
Sure.
seem to be a good option because hobbits sometimes have a tough time at the beginning getting going. You know, like
Yeah, it helps for, if your deck is got lower willpower to start, but again, you can never really have like too much, effects kind of like this in a way. So,
right.
yeah, it's good. And then it's kind of that's I guess I like the theme of it too. I don't know, just because it's Radagast on it, and it's him in kind of a more. I don't want. Well, I guess we can jump ahead and look at the art a little bit.
Yeah, let's do it.
It's Radagast the Brown, and there he is sitting in the middle of the woods. He doesn't look particularly cunningful.
He looks more contemplative,
Yeah.
contemplative. I don't know.
So his cunning is in a different way, but he's got some like birds, flying, some crows or something. He's got like a bear in the background, and but I like it because it's far from the movie depiction of him as kind of like a bumbling idiot.
That's what I was going to say. This makes Radagast seem more like different than Gandalf, of course, but this makes him seem more wizardy and less like the movie depiction where he just seems, like a cartoon character practically,
Yeah.
which is a shame that they did that to Radagast because nobody deserves that. Yeah, so I vacillate actually back and forth on the artwork on this. There's times when I look at this and I love it. It's like bright colors, kind of, for some reason, I always equate lore to like outdoorsy things, and this is like outdoorsy.
Yeah, me too.
It's, and I don't know exactly why I do that, but I do. Maybe it's a holdover from Magic the Gathering when green was the forest
forest color. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know, but and so there's days when I look at it, I'm like, this is really good, and then there's days I look at it and I just feel like it's like too I don't know, just not good. But this is a day that I'm looking at it, I'm like, I really like this artwork. So yeah. So
yeah, it's all right.
What's better, Radagast Cunning or Secret Paths?
I would say if you were choosing one, you had to like trim spots. I would probably choose Secret Paths by default, unless I knew the scenario had a card in it ahead of time. Mm-hmm. Like I said, that Goblin Town Scavengers. But I will go and mention too, if you are more of a veteran to the game and you are playing some nightmare scenarios, I will mention the value of this card goes up tremendously, and I mentioned that about Secret Paths too, I believe.
Right. Yep.
Because there are nightmare scenario locations that are 10 threat, and there are many enemies. I don't know what the highest one is, but there are enemies that are like consistently 4 threat,
right,
and like 5. I'm like,
like,
wow, every enemy in here is 3 to 4.
Right.
Like I look and I'm like, I will put Radagast Cunning in because it's so brutal. You need so much willpower to start.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how like the harder the game is, this card becomes more valuable.
Right. Right. It's just a card that you kind of forget about. Then it comes back and you're like, this is like an easy solution to that thing. Like, and of course, and I know Ted you always say this, but like you have to draw it. So that's always a thing. But, like, I feel like there's always going to be a target for this. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, like enemies, right. You
know,
might not
like,
have one for the turn that you have it in your hand or whatever, but like
Right.
there's going to be a time it'll come up.
yeah, I
Probably.
mean, every game that you're in, you turn over something and you're like, ugh. You know, like you just are like, ugh, you know, and it's that pseudo questing after the fact. You know, you can't beat it. So, well, should we ring this thing?
Yeah, let's bring it up with a register.
Okay, so for anybody who doesn't know or may have forgotten, we have a highly scientific yet arbitrary scale where we rank a card on a scale from 1 to 10. That's a highly arbitrary yet scientific system, not a scale. Anyways, 1 is the one card to rule them all, or one of the best cards in the game. A 10 is the card that we throw back into the fiery chasm from whence it was made. And so, Ted, since you love this card, you get to go first.
Cool. I wish I remember what I gave Secret Paths. I'm going to give this card a 4.
No, you gave Secret Paths a 4.
Ah, sweet. Then maybe I should give this one a 5 because it's not as good. I'm still going to give it a 4. Yeah, it's got a wizard on it. It's got Radagast on. Anything with a Atari is good. So
this is the arbitrary part of everything of everything, folks.
Yeah, it's like I said, you can draw it late game and you're like, oh man, but sometimes scenarios late game too. Sometimes like on the 3rd stage of the quest, you know, you have to flip an extra encounter card, or you had to flip over. You reveal a new stage and it's like flip over 1 card per player, and then you got a quest and flip over a new card, and then all of a sudden you're going backwards against the current, and it can just help. It can just dig you out sometimes.
Yeah. And I'm gonna, because I know that I also gave Secret Paths a 4, but I think that there's just less, like there's more ways to deal with enemies than there are with locations, right? Like I think that's just objectively, the way that it works. Not to say that this isn't as effective against those those enemies as Secret Paths is against those locations, but I just feel like this is, there's just way more things. So this is good tech, and it's tech you shouldn't forget. But I'm going to give it a 6 because it's like it's equidistant from 5. 5 is kind of the middle. Between the two of them together, they're like middle of the road. I'm not building, a Secret Paths Radagast Cunning deck, but I think that they're toolboxy and they deserve to have that. But I'm gonna have to give this a 6. So fair, right? Fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, anyways, there you have it. Radagast Cunning as we close down, getting ever so closer to the end of the core set here. Do you smell it? Do you smell the end here? It's only been 13 years since the game has been released that we finally got the core set cards going. But I think it's good that we're doing this, just because people who've been around forever kind of forget that these cards exist. They don't go to them. It takes a special person to have the whole card pool memorized and know exactly what they need when they're building a deck. And the whole idea is for us to inspire people to kind of build new decks and try things out and see what they did. So it's a good time to revisit the core set for all you veterans out there. So,
yep, agreed.
Yep. Okay, everybody, have a great day. See you next week.
Do you love the content? Here's what you can do to stay connected. Become a patron. The money collected through Patreon goes into keeping the lights on here at the podcast. We love our patrons, and you can join at many different levels. Visit patreon.com/cardtalk2018. You can subscribe to us, whether you're watching our YouTube channel or you're listening to us in your favorite podcatcher. Hit the subscribe button to get notifications of all our new episodes. Didn't know we were an audio podcast? Find us by searching Card Talk to get access to our 120 plus regular episodes. Didn't know we were a video channel? Find us by searching Card Talk LOTR LCG on YouTube, and there you can find not only our regular episodes, but you can find our bonus playthroughs and other content related to the game. Want to get a hold of Ted, Grant, or myself? Feel free to email the podcast at cardtalk2018@gmail.com.